Hello. I'm Mazz, and today I'm going to talk about failure. I've seen a lot in my time throughout my career in tech, spanning over a decade. Predominantly a backend developer, then some ops, bit of DevOps, and some Mazz ops, and at various points along the sliding scale of technical leadership. In this talk, I'm going to outline what kind of failure we'll be looking at. Then I'm going to tell you a story. I'll talk a bit about retrospectives and leadership and share a few things for you all to go and read. Then I'll wrap up and hopefully just saunter off stage, sit down and look cool. It's a lot for 20 minutes, but I like a challenge, so I'm just going to get stuck in. As developers and operations, we frequently embrace failure without perhaps consciously realizing it. It's ingrained in how we've been taught to think. Part of our jobs is problem solving and having to consider how things might go wrong so we can write code to handle these failures gracefully or to recover where appropriate. We want to fail fast in development. It's valuable to have a quick feedback loop so that we know if our code and infrastructure is working or not. We have a variety of tools to help us achieve that, like the different kinds of tests, continuous integration, and if you're really lucky, sometimes even a QA team. Amazing. We know that software contains bugs. No matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you work, no matter how many tests, no matter how many processes, software contains bugs. And we embrace that. And by embracing that, we are comfortable with it, for some definition of comfortable. Failure in our code is one thing, but what about failure in terms of Agile and our processes? For many of us, being Agile is also a part of our jobs, but it is not, in my experience, as ingrained in our thinking. Where's that feedback loop to tell us if we're failing our team and we don't realize it? How do we make it okay to fail? When is it not okay to fail? And how do we confront these failures and embrace them in the same way we do in failures in our code so that we can learn from it? To help explore some of this, I'm going to tell you a story. It is factual fiction and written by me. All of the individual events described have and did actually happen, but this story is a composite of many things I have experienced, and I've moved around details to aid both storytelling so you won't be bored, and to assure anonymity so I don't get sued. There is hopefully something in this story that everyone will be able to relate to, but if not, listen anyway, because it will help prepare you for when some of these things happen, because failures in people's behavior and our Agile processes is a matter of when, not if. It's how we choose to respond to these failures that makes the difference and helps determine what kind of price we'll pay for failing. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, no, actually wasn't that far away, it was here, down the road, in London, and not that long ago. Anyway, once upon a time, there was a Python developer called Junior. Hi, Junior. They were very excited to have just landed their second job joining, let's call them, Team Awesome! Team Awesome was a small team with a good range of experience and technical knowledge. The people seemed like great, caring and well-respected professionals. Junior felt confident they'd have the chance to learn from them and be a part of something good. Hooray! The first few weeks seemed to go well, and the team were mostly happy to share their wealth of knowledge and take the time to pair with Junior. Junior would go home happiest when someone had been able to pair with them, and by working together had enabled them to tackle a really meaty story that might otherwise have been given to someone else. Sadly, the shiny new job did not stay shiny for very long. Junior quickly noticed that members on the team seemed to keep getting sick, and velocity points seemed to be the only thing the team was allowed to talk about. And if the team was caught chatting too much, then a loud voice would drift across the office. And how many velocity points have you done today? That voice belonged to, let's call them, Voldemort. It was Voldemort that would run the retrospective every week, although Voldemort had got the team to skip the last one as they were behind on velocity points. Junior mostly just listened in retro and was really confused at how a team who seemed so awesome and experienced could have so many sad faces. Junior just wanted to help, but they didn't feel like they could, as they were still kind of new and everyone else had more important things to say. Well, they must be very important things to say, because everyone would get really loud and would sometimes talk over Junior, frequently not even letting them finish their sentence. This made Junior feel stupid and unworthy. Junior vowed to listen harder, learn harder, work harder. A few weeks passed, and it was time to do retrospective again. Junior was feeling especially anxious, as that previous night, while lying wide awake, not sleeping, they'd had an idea, and they were gathering the courage to share it with the team. It came to their turn, their heart pounding, much like mine, and their palms sweaty, much like mine. They breathed deeply and said, "1 week sprints make me sad. I think 1 week sprints are making everyone sad. I don't understand why we're working in 1 week sprints. They seem to have so much overhead that you never really get enough time to get into coding. I wanted to suggest, could we maybe please try 2 week sprints, and maybe then everyone won't be so stressed and we'll get more done." Oh dear. Poor Junior. Oh, they hadn't really been aware of the political landscape, and their team's reaction took them by surprise. The whole team was looking at Junior. Then they all looked down at the table in front of them. Then they all looked over to see what Voldemort's reaction would be. Junior didn't understand why everyone was so quiet. They'd done a bit of Agile before and thought this was the point of retrospective, to share what wasn't working well. They crossed their arms against their chest and just wished the ground would swallow them up. Voldemort's eyes narrowed. Voldemort couldn't quite believe their ears. The Junior had had the nerve to outright question their process and challenge them. Them! Voldemort! Voldemort, who'd worked for many years on big, serious, enterprise business websites, not trivial toy startup websites like Junior previously had. Voldemort was indignant. Their jaw clenched, and they powered up their eyes for the icy death glare. Junior felt sick. Their heartbeat was loud as 1,000 yaks stomping in their ears, and they felt the icy death glare graze against their cheek, when suddenly the tech lead raised their hand and said very softly, "I think I'd like to +1 that. I think Junior has a good point. I think we should try a 2 week sprint." Voldemort swiveled their head like an evil dead owl and shot an icy death glare in the tech lead's direction. Unclenching their jaw, Voldemort said, "Well, actually, we tried that before, and it didn't work. But if the team really wants to, then we can, but I still think it's wrong." The whole team looked at Voldemort, back down at the table, back to the tech lead, and then slowly at each other. They all got out of their chairs and +1 the sticky. Yay! Go team! At this point in the story, you might be hoping it has a happy ending. Spoilers, it doesn't. Things got worse for Junior now they'd angered Voldemort. They were hauled into a meeting the very next day, and Voldemort reminded them, "We hired you as a developer, not an agile consultant. When you start delivering more points, then I'll help coach you on agile process." My kingdom for a bag of fucking velocity points. If only we could buy some off Amazon Prime. No matter how hard Junior worked or how late, they were constantly reminded that they weren't delivering enough velocity points. Voldemort called a meeting to talk about, you guessed it, velocity points, and wanted to know what could be done to go faster. Sadly for Junior, the outcome meant that people were no longer able to pair with them or to take the time to share their knowledge, else they too would get beaten with Voldemort's velocity point stick of shame. For every tiny mistake anyone made, a whole new process was introduced to ensure it would never happen again. No amount of failure was tolerated. Soon there was a process and checklist for literally everything, and guess what? Things got slower. Voldemort was also the only one allowed to talk to senior management and senior stakeholders. No one knows exactly what they said, but the whispers amongst the corridors was that the business was impressed with what poor dear Voldemort was single-handedly achieving, despite having a difficult and low-performing team. Sadly, in this organisation, points really did mean prizes, and much to the team's surprise and despair, Voldemort got congratulated and was promoted to VP of Engineering. Voldemort instantly sidelined the team and put them on a new glass cliff project that no one else wanted to touch. Junior was fed up of being made miserable at work and quit to go freelance. The end. Not quite the end of the talk, but the end of the story. Not the happiest story, I know, but then not a lot of my own experiences are. Anyway, I'm going to focus now on two main sections: the failures in retrospective and the failure of leadership. In a perfect world where everything always goes well, you wouldn't need a retrospective. In the same way that software is imperfect, so are humans, and so is process. And there's never just one thing that needs fixing. We must work on getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, as this is what will enable us to recover from it and really learn from our failures. The retrospective is the space where we need to be open to making changes to both our process and our behaviour that will help fix whatever isn't working well for the team. How often do you and your team happily skip a retro? That can be a real warning sign that all is not well, and the value of a retro is being lost. You're failing yourself and your team if you're not actively participating in retrospectives. Start paying closer attention to who's speaking in a retro. Do the same people always talk first or talk the most? One thing you can try to help level the influencer field is maybe get those who are more experienced or who have served longer on the team, get them to speak last. This might help mitigate the failure of giving other people room to speak. And if you are senior, try listening more than you talk. And notice how it changes the behaviour of the team for the better. And I promise you it will. Another suggestion is that the person running the retro should be rotated. Everyone takes it in turns. Taking it in turns to run the retro is a really excellent opportunity for the team to learn and grow. And it helps offer different points of view, and everyone really gains a bit more ownership of the process. In my mind, the person running the retro shouldn't really be participating, because this is a really helpful reminder that it really is all about the team, and it's also good practice for putting your own ego to one side and building up some of that empathy so that you can really listen to when your team speaks. Working well together is more than just infernal velocity points. The power disparity between Voldemort and the rest of the team was a huge problem, and no amount of talking was going to fix it, as Voldemort was doing everything to hold on to that power imbalance. They were also the gatekeeper of influence and access to the senior management and senior stakeholders, so it's not even like the tech lead could have gone around them. That's a really tricky situation, and unfortunately, sometimes you just can't fix it. And you certainly can't fix it alone. You can tell a lot about the health of your team and organisation by looking at how you treat your juniors or less experienced members of the team. What is actively being done to share that power around and help build people up, rather than keeping them down and in their place? At the end of the story, we heard that Junior stuck it out for only a short while and then found the exit and headed out the door. I want to be very clear and say that I know not everyone has the privilege to be able to just quit. I just wanted to say that it is not your failure if you leave somewhere toxic. I've had to spend time honing my judgment of knowing when to stay and fight for change and when it's best to just get the hell out and leave. It's really uncomfortable for me to say that out loud in front of you all. It's also still true. Next is failure of leadership, which is something I could comfortably talk about for hours. It is something that is rife within our industry and a complex topic that is very close to my heart. The first thing to know about leadership is that you don't wake up on the morning you've been promoted, having been imbued by the power of Grayskull with magical leadership skills. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work like that. Just because you're really good at coding does not mean you are automatically going to be good at leadership, and especially without having to work on it. Knowledge and leadership skills are two very different things. And I really wish more people in our industry would realize and learn this. There's many different styles of leadership, and it doesn't always have to be the alpha, commanding, aggressive approach that I see so often in tech today. So what can you do? Well, here's some resources to get you going. The Tannenbaum-Schmidt continuum theory, try saying that when you're drunk, is a leadership model that is about balancing control with your team's need for freedom. It's from research from 1958, but it is still relevant to today. Being in a position of leadership requires some next-level maturity and thoughtfulness. A good leader is one who delegates and coaches the team. A good leader ensures that when everything goes well, the team gets the credit. And if it all goes horribly wrong, well, the leader must take the brunt of the blame. Voldemort repeatedly failed their team with their over-controlling behavior and shaming tactics that led them to work their team to the ground. Voldemort ensured that the team got the blame for everything, but when it came to taking the credit, that they, and they alone, got it all. And thus the promotion ensued, even when it was the team that had delivered. This is a horrible way to lead, and yet, again, one I see often and people fall into the trap of doing. So what else? Books! I love books! Books are awesome! You should all love books too! I recommend you all read a book called Primal Leadership, whether you're in a position of leadership or not, and no, I didn't write it, and no, I don't get any money for it. I just found it to be that good. It's really invaluable, and it helped me further learn about different leadership techniques. And it also gave me a greater understanding of the language used to talk to stakeholders and varying levels of management. More books! Second book is Daring Greatly. It's about courage, vulnerability, and empathy. And I know empathy is a word that gets bounced around a lot lately. It's a skill like any other, and you can work on it, and you can get better at it. So I implore you all to read this book. Your future teammates will thank you. It's also important to recognize that there is always more than one way to fix things, and be careful of disregarding someone else's opinion just because it's different, or they look different, or they sound different. Different doesn't mean it's wrong. A retrospective and inclusive team culture requires openness. So ask yourself, what are you actively doing to contribute to an environment where people can be open and talk? It may be uncomfortable that the first thing you can do to start with is talk less and actively listen more. We know we can embrace failure like we do our code and systems. With some effort, we can learn to do the same with our processes and our own behavior. Utilize that power for good and get the most out of your retrospectives by hearing from everyone and not just making changes that bring about more processes or get you more bags of velocity points at the expense of others just to make you look good in front of management. Embrace your failure and learn from it. Own it. Own that failure and fix it where possible. and learn to tell the difference between your own failures and that of others. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Learning is uncomfortable at times. It's about how you think and what you do with that information. Software is imperfect. Remember that everybody else, including you, are imperfect too. Thank you.